So session on SharePoint Learning Kit, using SharePoint as an e-learning tool. I keep looking at the screen, and it's because the laptop's a bit funny and I can't see it on my display here. So what I want to cover for today, a little bit about myself and why I'm qualified to talk about SharePoint Learning Kit, what SharePoint Learning Kit is and what's new in it, the basic workflow of using SharePoint Learning Kit at a high level, and then jump into some demonstrations, of which most of the session will be demonstrations of how to use it, followed by a little bit on best practices and the future, followed by questions, but happy to take questions at any time. First of all, I'm Richard Willis. I'm the project coordinator for the SharePoint Learning Kit and also its sister project on Coplex, Microsoft Learning Gateway. I've worked in education integration for about 8 years now and with SharePoint for about 6. 3 years ago, I set up Salamandersoft Limited, which I'm the managing director and sole employee, really, which works in integrating systems in schools and also SharePoint in education. I've got a blog at blog.salamandersoft.co.uk. There's my email address and Twitter handle rpwillis. So, getting straight into it, what is SharePoint Learning Kit? It's a simple but powerful SharePoint tool that gives instructors the ability to assign and track almost any work to learners. It runs in SharePoint 2007 and 2010. In fact, it has to run in it. There is a basic example of a SCORM player in an ASP.NET application, including within the project, but basically it runs in SharePoint, and a lot of the functionality is based on the SharePoint functionality. The assignments you assign are hosted in SharePoint document libraries, and whether you're an instructor or learner is determined by permissions in SharePoint. It also allows anyone to play SCORM content from within SharePoint. Is everyone familiar with SCORM? Yeah, anyone not familiar? Okay, Shareable Content Object Reference Model, I think it stands for. I can never quite catch it. It's a set of specifications and standards for packaging up web-based learning content. So it describes how it's packaged up in a zip file with a manifest with some metadata about the files and listing all the files in it, and how it interacts with the learning management system, the LMS that hosts it. It's got rules for stuff like sequencing, how you progress through the learning content, whether it's in one ABC type way or whether it's branched, and whether there's any rules about whether you can get to a point before you do a previous point and so on. It also allows automatic marking of tests and quizzes. But SharePoint Learning Kit allows you to run this in SharePoint, either running it yourself or being assigned it by an instructor. And finally, it's an open source project. It's hosted in Coplex at that URL, www.coplex.com/slk, and Coplex is a Microsoft open source hosting site. It was originally written by an internal team at Microsoft. Background behind it was that in the SharePoint 2003 time frame, they had a product called Class Server. Anyone here use Class Server? No? That was, like a lot of their products, they'd bought the company that produced Class Server to bring it into their portfolio. But in the transition to 2007, they decided to scrap it. Don't know the reason behind it. It was a standalone product and wasn't integrated in SharePoint, so I guess that was part of the reason. There was a little bit of integration in SharePoint in that there were a couple of web parts that you could see information from Class Server in SharePoint. And also there was a utility which created sites in SharePoint based on the classes in Class Server, but it wasn't really integrated. They decided to scrap it, realised they needed a replacement for it for the educational use in SharePoint, and produced SLK, which did some of what Class Server did, but not everything. Class Server included a grey book and a content creation tool. SLK doesn't include either of those at the moment. It does need a grey book adding, but it will never have a content creation tool within it. It's based around SCORM. It will also play the Class Server content, so for the organisations that had huge libraries of Class Server content they created, you could still use them. So originally coordinated by someone at Microsoft, but about 2 or 3 years ago now, he wasn't given any extra time over his day job to look after it, decided he didn't have enough time and asked for a volunteer to take over. And I'd been contributing to the forums and adding patches to it, so I volunteered and took over. What's new? Current version is version 1.5, the stable version. Main highlight of this release is SharePoint 2010 support. So there's feature parity between 2007 and 2010 versions, and there will be at least the next couple of releases. and includes support for claims-based authentication. I've only really added that because that was the hardest bit of porting it over. It's got a couple of new quick assignment actions, which I'll come to during the demo. If you haven't used a version prior to 1.5, they won't really mean much to you. Also, the localization support for Elearning Actions. There's a very key part of SharePoint Learning Kit, which you had to click on to assign a piece of work, and you couldn't localize that or change the text in any way, which has been a problem up until then. And Elearning Actions is just a fairly naff text string to use anyway. And quite a few bug fixes. The current version in development is 1.6. It's what I'm developing at the moment. It's what I'll be demoing, so there may be a few rough edges and errors appearing. The headline new functionality for that is emailing of assignment details. So when you create an assignment or update it, you can email the learners about what's happening. I won't actually be demonstrating the emailing because this machine isn't beefy enough to have Exchange on as well, but I can show you where you can set it up, but it won't actually email anything out. Quick assignments are just a description. Up until 1.6, you had to have a document in a document library which you assigned to the learners. Now you can just type the description in and assign it. There's a few performance enhancements, some better handling of non-conformant SCORM content. So although SCORM is a standard, it's quite a big standard, can be a little woolly around the edges, and not everyone implements it in quite the same way. And there's quite a few SCORM packages and tools which produce SCORM which isn't quite conformant. So an example of some stuff I've just recently worked around is that when you store the answers, you can also pass in the text of the question as well, so that when you look at the answers later, you can see the text of the question. This is outside of the package. The SCORM standard says there's a maximum limit of 250 characters to that, and some content was passing in more than that. And SLK was, up until that point, being very aggressive about what it would accept and just failing with an error message explaining why. So I've truncated that instead and let you continue. So the Dropbox was introduced in 1.4 as part of enhancements of non-SCORM content. You've always been able to assign any document in SharePoint Learning Kit, but the way the learners got their finished assignments back to the learner back to the instructor was always sort of out of band, either email or handing it in. 1.4 introduced a Dropbox where within SharePoint Learning Kit itself they could upload the documents back and then edit it. But as part of that, there was editing in place in Office. 1.6 is going to add Office Web Apps supports that instead of just the full featured Office client. That's not done yet, but that's going to be in 1.6. Also updating internationalization. I think SharePoint supports SharePoint Learning Kit supports something like 39 different languages, but the translation is still a bit behind at the moment. Two main reasons for that is, one, I need to find translators, but the main one is the utility for extracting the strings out and then putting the translated strings back in needed updating. So I've been working on that, and then I can find some translations and more bug fixes. So, basic workflow. It's actually quite similar to a non-electronic workflow of assignments. Teach uploads the content into the learning resource library, sort of the equivalent of writing the homework on a blackboard. Assigns the content to the students. Students then access the assignments via the assignment list Webpart, which we'll be going into later, similar to finding it in their homework diary. In attempts the assignment, I writes whatever they need to write and then submits it back to the teacher, equivalent of handing their work in. And then the teacher then accesses the finished assignment through the assignment list Webpart, just like the pupils accessed it through it. And finally, reviews grades and returns the assignment back to the pupils. So, straight into the demos. First of all, running SCORM content. So there's a document library full of learning content that you want to access and just run it yourself without an instructor assigning anything. So hopefully, we've got a little site collection here. Nothing special, just a very basic site collection. And here I've got a document library. I'll put this drop down, then hopefully there should be nothing in there about e-learning at the moment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up as I go through. What you'd normally have is this all set up ready for the instructors, so they don't need to do anything. I just wanted to show you how it all links together. So we go to Site Settings and Manage Site Features. We can then activate SharePoint Learning Kit, go back to the home page, and then all the documents on the document library. We've now got Elearning Actions. And this is a piece of text that you couldn't change before, so fairly naff piece of string really. You can now change that to whatever you want if you want to. So click on that, and this brings up the first page of a signing piece of content. Now at the top you can see a title and description that's been pulled out. So the title is actually the title of the document within the document library at the moment, and the description's been pulled out from the metadata within the package itself. And then we'll ignore the bottom bit at the moment, and we'll assign the learning resource to yourself. This now brings up the lobby page. I assume it's called lobby because it's the start of how you access the content. And it's got a little bit of metadata about the course, again the title and description. There's a little bug there on the site where saying the website's not accessible. The score, you haven't got a score yet because you haven't started it, and the status not started. Important thing there is the begin assignment. This then brings up the SCORM player, also known as the SLK frame set. Now part of it is provided by SLK, and part of it is provided by the package itself. So the top bar across the top with Solitaire course and the save and close across the top is provided by SLK. The left-hand bar with all the navigation on, that's also provided by SLK. So that's read the manifest, read the navigation within the manifest, and created that for it. You see here the Canfield and Klondike bits of it are disabled. That's because the package has told it that the learner can't access that until they've done the quick check under the introduction. So this package itself is part of the download for SLK. It's a SCORM package that someone who wrote part of SLK hand wrote in JavaScript and HTML as an example of what you can do in SCORM and for testing SharePoint Learning Kit. So we can go through this. We can either click on the navigation and go through. And this package is a combination of information and some tests. Packages can be a combination, or they can just be information, or they can just be tests. It's however the author decides to create them. So I'll just put some answers in here. Obviously, you can tell it's a demonstration package by the fact you've got all the answers on next to the questions, which you wouldn't normally have, unless it's a test of whether you can copy things. And checkout says here, and then what the package, this is the package doing this now, it's checked all the answers, seen what's correct, it's immediately fed it back. That's just how the package is written. Some packages will do that, some will tell you at the end how you've done, some will just tell you your score and not what you've done in the individual questions. But it's also communicated with the learning management system it's in this case SLK, and told it, right, it's got enough questions, right, you can now let them go on to Canfield. So in addition to going through the navigation, there's forward and back here. So we're through to the next quick check. And unless you're particularly interested in Solitaire, I'll just do as quickly as possible. I'll get some right and some wrong. And if you don't want this navigation here anyway, you can pop it up. Page 1. And it's just some examples of question types you can get in SCORM. But how the question types are handled is purely down to the package. Most packages created by content creation tools tend to create the packages in Flash because you can do more whizzy-bangy things. And now finished, and this package has got a finish lesson button, which automatically tells the learning management system you finished, and that automatically submits it. You see here, this lobby page is now changed. The status has changed to final, and the buttons at the top have changed to. And review assignments, you can go in there, and it's remembered what answers you've given. So you can see there, it's got all the answers in there. Whether this is supported by a particular package is down to the tool that's created the package. Some packages will support review mode, others won't. Most do. Some content creation tools you do need to set particular settings so that it does. But SharePoint Learning Kit will support that if the package does. So that's the first way of running content yourself. The next way, go back to Site Actions, I'm going to enable another feature. Assign self. Go back here, and now you see another custom action on here, assigned to self. And it basically does the same thing as before, but misses out that first step where you choose between whether to assign it to yourself or to someone else. It assigns it itself straight away and back to this page, and then you can just begin it as before. I won't go through it again because it's not a very interesting assignment once you've seen it once. So that's running school content yourself. Next demonstration is going to be this logging in as an instructor and assigning work to learners. So I go to the home page, and I'm logged in as demo administrator who's an instructor. So again, using the Solitaire package, what I'm going to go to Elearning Actions, and this time I'm going to assign it to someone else. So out of the box, in this section here, you've just got the current site you're on, but then you can go to add a site to this list. This is a little bit clunky in that you need to type it in, or you would normally do is go to the page you want to assign it from and copy and paste. Hopefully that's the right one. So test that link. Yep, that's the site. So add that to the list. Then I can choose that. And then you're at the page where you can set up all the properties of the assignment. Again, it's pulled the title out. The algorithm for selecting the title, first of all, it sees if the title column in the document library is filled. If it is, it uses that. If that's not filled in, then it looks in the package itself for a title property. And if it's there, it uses that. If that's not there, then it just uses the name of the file. The description, it pulls out the package, assuming the description's in the package. The points, you can actually change the points, but it puts default. For SCORM 2004 packages, it's always 100 points. For SCORM 1.2 packages, it uses a number of points that's specified in the package. The start date is the earliest date the learners can access the assignment, and then the due date is obviously the date when it's due. I'm going to put today. The annoying bit about this at the moment is that's midnight at the beginning of the day, which isn't normally what you want when you put the 12th on. You probably mean you want it sometime during the 12th. That's to bear in mind. Now, if it goes past the due date, it's still accessible to the learners. The due date is more as a case for putting in specific queries, which we'll see later in the assignment, this web part. To stop the learners having access to the assignment, you have to manually collect it in from them through the grading page. Now, this checkbox, you've got that checked. It will email the learners to say they've been assigned an assignment, or if you make any changes that affects them, such as adding them or removing them or changing the title or description, it'll also email them about that. Then automatically return learner assignments when they're submitted. That makes it very similar to when we just self-assigned, in that immediately they finish the assignment, they get the feedback of how many points they've got. If that's not ticked, then as an instructor you get to look at it and mark it first before they get to see their results when you return it to them. And then this one, this disabled one down here, show learners the correct answers to auto-graded questions when the assignment is filed. That's only for class server content. And it basically does what it says on the tin. And then down the bottom, you've got your instructors and learners you can assign to. On this site, there's only one instructor set up, which is who I'm logged in as. And then there's 6 potential learners. They've got the SLK learner permissions on the site. You can also see the groups down there, and you can use the groups to auto-populate the learners if you want. Now, the thing to remember about groups is that although you can select the groups there, you're actually assigning to individuals, not to groups. So it's purely for automatically populating these boxes here. You can't assign to a group. So click OK, and it's saved away, and those learners are then assigned the work. If someone else joins that group, even though it's ticked there, they don't get the assignment, because it's just for filling in those boxes there. If someone leaves that group, they've still got the assignment. Yes?
Can you show how you populate these groups? Where do you do it from?
Right, those groups can either be SharePoint groups or Active Directory groups. And then SharePoint Learning Kit will read who's in those groups and automatically fill in the site.
I come from an institution with 30,000 students.
Yeah.
That is impossible to show in that screen.
Yes.
So how can you do something about that stuff if you could use it?
With difficulty. It doesn't really work with large groups at the moment. That's one of the best practices, is it doesn't work with large groups. It's just too slow, unfortunately. The way of handling that is to have more sites and do it in the site level. Have more sites, automatically populate the list of sites you can assign to and narrow it down that way, which I'll come to later. So we're assigning to those 3 pupils, and that's it. They've now been assigned it and can access it through the assignment list web part. So now if we go back and we'll go to we're now going to assign a Word document. So we'll just click Elearning Actions before. Just choose the same site. Here you can see the title's populated. Again, it's either the title in the document library or the file name, depending if that column's filled in. There's no description here because it's not a SCORM package, so it's got no manifest with the extra information. Points are blank because that could be anything you want. And you don't have to have points for an assignment. The automatically return learner assignments is now disabled because that doesn't make sense with a Word document. But apart from that, it's all pretty similar. So just assign to those few pupils again. Takes a little bit longer to assign because in the background it's doing some stuff with document libraries. This is taking even longer still because I've just rebooted this machine, so nothing's warmed up. But that's now been assigned to them. And I'm just going to very quickly do that again. So, in fact, one thing I forgot to say, site settings. We're going to add another feature. We're going to activate the assigned to site feature. This is one of the new 1.5 features again. And now, on all the drop-downs, we've got assigned to site. And again, what that does is short-circuits the process. It misses out that first page, automatically assigns it to the current site that the document's stored in. It's only of use if you assign to the same site that the document's in. Quite often, or usually, your learning resources actually be stored in a separate site, which I'll come to later. So we call this hardware homework 2 rather than 3. So the same 3 pupils. I'm going to set that due date again today. Show you something later. And the last way of assigning pieces of work is a new one in 1.6, which is just the description. So here I'm going to go and edit the page and add the quick assignment web part. Line it up a bit. So the UI of this will change. That's literally the minimum that it needs to do the back end. The back end's all written. This will change. If for no other reason, if this drop down here, that shows what's the same in that list of sites you've assigned to before. That does some processing, goes away, gets some SharePoint sites. So there's extra processing in the background there. This web part could well sit on your home site, and obviously you don't want to add any extra processing here for a site. For a page, it's going to be viewed lots and lots. So I'll either have to remove that and have an extra step in, or more likely do some sort of AJAX thing to only get those sites when you're using them. So just type an assignment in here. This is your homework. Assign to that site again. And then that just takes you through to the assignment properties website again. And the only difference between this and using a Word document is there's no document behind this. So it's literally just the text you put in there, which means you do have to make sure your title and description is there. So it's photography homework. And click OK on that. So I think that's 4 assignments we've just made. And so moving on to the next demo, which is the assignment list web part. Now this is the main way pupils access the functionality of SharePoint Learning Kit. So if we edit the page again, at the moment I'm still logged in as the instructor, but that's fine, because the instructor uses it as well. Add a web part again. And again, this is all going to be set up for your learners beforehand. I'm just stepping through it. So it's all a bit squashed now. I've changed my screen resolution. Can I just drag that over here? Yeah, that's better. So it's a tabbed paradigm. So on the left-hand side, you've got a set of queries. And that splits the assignments up into sets based on either the status of the assignment or their due date. And see here, we've got due today. I did 2 due today, so they should be in there. And really, this is what the due date's used for, is to split the assignments up into these buckets. And then you've got a set of columns along here for the instructor, its site assignment, date, and submitted. Now, you notice there's only 2 assignments there, and we made at least 4 assignments. That's because there's a very important property in this web part up here, which is showing you this site's assignments. So I flick that off. Now we've got all the assignments in the SLK database. Now, each site collection is associated with one SLK database, but an SLK database can contain more than one site collection. And how that's set up is going to be down to how your SharePoint's organised and how your learners are organised. Most of the work I do is with schools, and normally they're going to want all their site collections, if they've got more than one, all to be sharing the same SLK database. So when you flick that property off, then their students will be able to see all their homework. So with it set off here, you're going to use this in something like their homepage so they can see all their assignments that they've got. If it's on this specific class site, on the maths site, for example, you'll probably have it checked so that it does only show the assignments for the maths thing, so that when they're focused on it, they can just see those assignments. Now, the other thing you can do with this web part, I'm going to add another version of it. And you can target it even more than that. So I'll edit that again. The query control is the left-hand tabbed bit. And then you can tell it just to use one of these queries or some other queries. You do need to know what they're called, but that's reasonably easy to find out. Do OK on that. Okay, stop editing. If I can find where I've put the web part. Now, because I'm logged in as an instructor, that view's just looking for assignments that are due today if you're a learner, so it's not going to show anything for me as an instructor. So I'll now log out and log in as a pupil. Now those are all the homework due, all the assignments due today for this pupil. And if we scroll down, then we can see all their assignments. You see, due today 4, they've got to do 5. So you notice here, they've got an extra column for file submission over the instructors. That's to do with non-email content, which we'll come to in a minute. But again, it's all completely configurable. What these queries are, how many of them are, all configurable. That's at a site collection level, though, configurable by your SharePoint administrator, not by individual instructors. So now, we'll have a look at it from the learner's view. How does the learner do an assignment? So they get to it via the assignment list web part. We start off, as we did with the instructor, with the SCORM package, so solitaire course. Again, you get to the lobby. It's now looking very similar to when we did the self-assignment. Again, begin assignment, fires it up. This time I am going to do a little bit to show another capability of SLK and SCORM. Check the answers there. Save that away to the assignment database. What I'm going to do now is save and close. Now you can see the status has changed to in progress, but you can resume the assignment. So we click on resume the assignment, and it will remember where you've got to and what answers you've given. You can see on the quick check there, and it's still got all the answers, but on the quick check on here, nothing's been done. If we look on the summary there, save and close again, resume assignment, it'll even remember exactly page you got to. Again, this depends on the package supporting that facility. But if the package supports a facility, then SLK allows you to use it. I'll now submit that. So I've had enough of doing that. I'm going to submit it even though I didn't finish it. And you can see, because it's not, I didn't check that auto return box, there's no score there yet, and there won't be until the instructor has a look at it and marks it. So that's the SCORM. Now if we look at the Word document, here you can see an extra button come up for submit files, which is disabled at the moment because you haven't started it. In fact, that's not the one I just assigned, that's the Class D. That's one that was hanging over before. Right, let's go down to here to do Best Practice Conference Solid. That's the right assignment, that's the one I want, out of 20. So now there's a begin assignment and not review assignment. This hasn't been started, status not started. Both the submit files and the submit button disabled. So I begin the assignment, then because it's a Word document, then it will automatically open up in Word, and I can edit it in there, hit save, and then go straight back to SharePoint. So I just put something in here. Save that, close it down. I can resume it later if I want, change it again. Down, and I finish with it, so I'm going to submit it for marking by the instructor. So now everything's grayed out. I can't do anything until the instructor's marked it and sent it back to me. So there is another way of submitting files though. So if we go to Solitaire Homework 2, we'll say begin, have a look at what the document is. It says something like take a set of photographs or something. You go to submit files, and here you can submit multiple files. So just select a few things. Submits it, that's submitted, and again it's gone to the instructor for marking. Finally, there's that one which was just text, if I can find that. This is your homework. Now, literally just been working on this, so those should be enabled now, but they're not. But we can get around that. But it works exactly the same way as that Word document, except there's no Word document to edit to start with, so we can just submit the files. It shows me, now it gives me an opportunity to show you that you can do it through the assignment list web part. Submit files brings up exactly the same dialogue. Now as we submit file through that. So I've now done my homework. So I'll log back in as the instructor and mark it. I'll try to log in as the instructor. So I'll Now got our assignment list Webpart. Down the page. Now we've got some ready to grade. Now I'll try and pick out the ones which we just did. Probably that solitaire course is the SCORM one. So this is now the grading page. So it's got some basic information at the assignment, what you set before. You can go into Edit Properties and change the assignment if you want. Normally to add more learners or take some away. And then you've got a list of all the learners in the assignment. Here there's just 2 of them. Pupil 1 who submitted, Pupil 2 hasn't started yet. And then you can see on the right hand side you've got actions, which in this case are return and collect. If you collect, that will take it away from the learner so they can't do it anymore. It won't appear in their assignment list Webpart. So now you see the learner is hyperlinked. You can click on that and it'll open up in review mode. So you can see what answers they gave. Have a look. And I'm pretty sure those are incorrect because I didn't do them. You can look at that, you can keep the score or you can modify it if you want. Not a very good score, so I could try harder. This time, and save that. And you have to return it to the learners or they won't get the results. So you see the action's now changed to reactivate. You can reactivate it, which means that you then get a chance to take it again if they haven't. Say you want them to try again because they really didn't bother with it or didn't do very well. There's also some convenience buttons up the top. Collect all and return all will do what it says. Collect it, all the assignments for ones who haven't returned it, and return it all to the students. So that's that SCORM package. So if we go in and look at one of the Word documents we assigned, which will be solitaire homework. Here you've got an extra column as well, file submission, in addition to the status. And that, the hyperlink on the pupil as well, will open up the document. Again, you can then edit it straight away. Well, you should be able to edit it straight away. I'll click something on. Let's do it nicely in red. Save that, Control S, so however you like saving in Word. It's now been saved away. Final score, give me 10. Now that score has to be a number. If you want to put grades in, you just stick it in here. Keep up the good work. And again, you need to return it so they can see the results. Now if we go back to the list, and then the one that we submitted multiple documents for, which is that one. Now if you click on it, you see a list of the documents, and from there you can go into them. And if they're Office documents, then you can edit them as before. Now there is another way of accessing all those documents. If you go to the site, you can access the Dropbox directly. Now, view site content, I've lost it. So in the background, when you assign a non-SCORM package or non-class server package to learners, it will create a Dropbox in the site that you've assigned to. It's not hidden or anything, it's just not by default put in any navigation, because that's really up to the owner of the site to put it in navigation. So we've got the Dropbox here. It's all assigned, it's all arranged by assignment. So the default view has it all out by assignment. So if you want to, you can go in and modify and look at it through here, just like any SharePoint document. So that would just be opening read only. If you go to documents, you could go in, select it and edit document. That's the one we did earlier. And also, every assignment has its own view. So you can go in and narrow it down through here as well if you want. Again, a bit of a hierarchical view going on in there. In my view, it's probably easier to access it through the grading page because then you can set the scores up straight away in there as well. But it depends on how the instructors want to mark it. If they just want to go through a list of documents one after a time, it might be easier for them through here. So now the instructors looked at it. If we go back to the home page, log back in as a pupil. We now go down, see the assignments that have been returned to us, and look at the score. So if we look at the score one, Basics of Solitaire, that's not the one we did, that's Site Class D. Did I not return it? That's the one, I set it to 30. It was to the SharePoint Best Practices conference site. And again, go into review mode, see what we've done, exactly the same as before. But you can also see the comments of the instructor down there. Obviously, I'll just put a short comment in, you can put in longer comment if you want. Go back to assignment list Webpart. And look at the Word document, which is that one, I think. And you can review it. And there you can see the instructors put a comment directly in the document itself, as you saw me do earlier. And you've also got the document, the comment on the assignment as well. And if you put multiple files in, that would just pop up the multiple file window you saw before in the instructor view. So that pretty much covers the whole process of assigning content, the learner going through it, the instructor grading it, and then sending it back to the learner. So, best practices. You have to assign to sites, so you need to set your sites up so that it's the best use for your instructors. It's just the way SharePoint Learning Kit is architected. To use the SharePoint features, you assign to sites. So, set the sites up. Best practice so it's best for the instructors, which may mean creating sites just for use for SLK for the instructors to assign to, and they're not actually accessed in any other way. Normally, they can be used as a collaboration site as well for discussion forums, blogs, wikis as well. Even if you're not storing document content in there, it can be a good place for the students to help each other and talk about the subject. What I have seen, an anti-best practice, is set up by a large SharePoint consultancy for a school in the UK. They knew how to set SharePoint up, just about. They didn't know anything about SharePoint Learning Kit. They knew how to modify Active Directory, so what they did was created an Active Directory group per class, which is probably about 1,000 groups. Created one page in SharePoint for SharePoint Learning Kit and gave all those groups SharePoint Learning permissions on the page. So that for the teachers to use SharePoint Learning Kit, they assigned it to that site, then they had a list of all the classes in the school on the left-hand side and all the users on the right-hand side, and they just had to dig through. It does work, but it took about 10 minutes to load the page to start with, and then because there's lots of JavaScript in the background checking when you click the groups and the users to see which groups and that, it was unusable, and funnily enough, they never actually got around to using SharePoint Learning Kit after 1 or 2 tries. So, yeah, split it out. And because when you use the classic e-learning actions, you get a list of your sites that you've assigned to first, you can start drilling down that way. So how you split it up is going to be very dependent on your organisation and how learners are organised and what you're teaching. But typically, if you have a site per course, it works really nicely. Third point, use resource libraries. You could store all your content in the course sites themselves, either available to the learners or in an area of it that's not available to them. But it's not very reusable that way. It's then only reusable in that course. If it's stored in a resource library, A, you may not want your learners to have access to it before you assign to it. Again, that depends on your context. The way I look at it, in a school, if you've got learning content available, you're probably really quite happy if the students go and look at it before they actually want to get to it, because it's not a formal test. SharePoint Learning Kit isn't a tool for applying formal tests for taking qualifications or anything like that. SCORM as itself is not secure enough for that. If you look at how the education boards do it, you have separate Active Directory logins for that, absolutely no permissions and secure connections to their site. It's for quick tests, it's fine. If they really wanted to, they could probably break how the tests are set up, in that they could figure out what the answers are using network sniffers or something like that. It's not mega secure, but for a quick test, just to test that they know the knowledge, fine. But use resource libraries, because it puts everything in a central place, so it can be reused by more than one person, it can be shared easily, you know where to find it, you don't have to go through half a dozen different courses that you teach to find it, and you can reuse it year to year. Automatically populate the instructor's list of classes courses. That's so when they click on Elearning Actions, they've got it there in front of them. It just makes it easier for the instructors. I'll come on a bit more of that on the next slide. There are ways of automatically populating that. There is an API in SharePoint Learning Kit which allows you to populate that, so you can either write some custom code to do that, either in whatever your favourite .NET language is or PowerShell. There's a little utility included within the SharePoint Learning Kit project called Provision from Excel, which will do it from an Excel spreadsheet, where you will need to compile up yourself, or there are third-party provisioning tools around who will do it. And don't use large groups. If you've got a domain group of several thousand users, you're going to hit the performance problems again. And if that's the only way you can split it up, you really need to be looking at a different tool at the moment. It's not designed to handle at the moment. Best practices for schools. Most of my work is with schools, so I can speak on this. In a sense, it's very similar to the last slide. Create a site per class teaching group, because that's what teachers want to assign to. They want to click e-learning actions, get a list of their classes, Maths 7A, click on that and then get a list of their learners straight away. Either assign it to all of them, or if they've got some work for more gifted and talented people, pick out a couple. It's just the easiest way. And I should have put that second, automatically populate the teacher's list of classes. Again, I don't know what it's like in your organisations, but in some schools there are people who aren't very technically minded. They don't want to do anything differently to how they've done it in the past, and if there's any obstacles in their way, they'll refuse to do it. So make it as easy as possible for instructors. If all they need to do is go click, 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 and that's done, great. Use departmental sites as resource libraries. In a school, it's quite likely you're going to have many teachers teaching the same subject. So if all your resources are in a central place, then they can be reused more easily, found more easily, reused between years more easily. Again, this is in the wrong order. I don't know why I thought I'd change that. At year end, archive the class sites. Not so relevant if you're literally just using the sites to assign to, but if there's any sort of collaboration in there, then that's going to be specific to that year. You archive them away into an area of SharePoint that no one goes to, so that if you do ever need to get to it, you can get to it again. And then create a new set of class sites for the next year, so that when the new class comes in, then it's all fresh and clean for them. Which follows on to don't use Active Directory or SharePoint groups. Now, the only reason for that is that a lot of your classes will have the same names year on year on year, which means that when it comes to year end, you're going to need to empty all the students out of it, populate the next lot of students into it before you can use it. But that then mucks all the permissions up on your class sites. If you've got a site per class, the students that used to be in the group no longer have access to that site if they need to. The students who are now in the group have access to that site, which is last year's stuff. Set up the assignment list Webpart to only display this year's assignments. Like I said, it's fully configurable. You had all those query sets on the left-hand side. by default, they pull back all assignments from when SharePoint Learning Kit was installed and first used. In a school environment, really, you're only interested in this year's assignments normally. So modify it so the default only shows that. And if you want to look at old ones elsewhere, then set up some custom views and do it just on that place. The future. So version 1.6, I'm hoping to release the beta in May. I covered what's going to be in that. Version 1.7, a bit more hand-wavy. Hoping to get some reporting in, because at the moment the only reporting really is through the grading page. Slk Members Webpart is going to be very similar to the out-of-the-box Members Webpart, but just show the instructors and learners on the site, labelled instructors and learners, and the ability to just display SCORM content. Think back to the very first demo where I went to assign to self, so you assigned it and then you could run it. The ability just to run it. Because quite a lot of packages just have information in, no tests, so you don't really need an assignment around that. Further ahead, I would like to support large groups. Don't know how I'd go about that yet. Support for later versions of SCORM. It supports 2004, 1 and 2, and version 1.2. There is SCORM 2004 version 3 and 4, which has some minor modifications. It will probably run content in those formats as it is, but any of the exotic stuff in there it won't run. And ideally, what I'd really like to do is make it into a sandbox solution so you can use it in Office 365 for education. See, there's a big problem with that at the moment, and that it's got its own database, and you can't, no way of creating it in 365, but you can't access databases in a sandbox solution. You can't even call web services, so you can't use a web service to access a separate database. I don't know how feasible that is, and that would be quite a big job, so I don't know where I'd get the time for that either. But ideally, I'd like to get there. So, brief whistle-stop tour of it. Just got time for some questions, if there are any.